That morning, I heard a terrifying scream from my daughter's room, Elena, the bride of today. I rushed in and froze. Her head was completely shaved, hair scattered all over the floor, and on the pillow lay a note. Now you finally look like who you are. I had no idea who did it, but I knew from that very moment this wedding was no longer about love. Before I tell you what happened next, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. My name is Raymond Hale. I'm 68. I used to found the biggest construction company in the Pacific Northwest. After my wife died, my whole world narrowed to one person, Elena, my only daughter. I promised my wife on her hospital bed that I would take care of our girl as if she were my life. I kept that promise. Every dollar, every project, every sleepless night, all so she would never want for anything. But that morning, the day that should have been the happiest of her life, began with a scream that tore my chest. I still hear it in my head. It came from the second floor, cut through the hallway like ice. My heart stopped. When I pushed the door open, I found Elena collapsed in front of the mirror. She held her head with both hands. She was shaking. Clumps of hair lay across the floor. Her scalp was raw and bleeding. On the pillow sat a neat white sheet of paper scrawled in black ink. Now you finally look like who you really are. The smell of antiseptic hit me, that same cold clinical scent I'd only ever smelled in an operating room. It smelled like betrayal. I staggered. The man who had signed deals worth millions could only stand there silent, fighting for breath. Elena, who did this to you? I asked. She didn't answer. She stared at me in the mirror with an empty, haunted look. The police came later. Everything was too clean. No sign of forced entry. No camera footage. But I knew this wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Someone wanted me to know they could touch my daughter inside our home on the morning of her wedding. When I went to my study, my safe was open. Last night, I had placed the transfer envelope $17 million inside. A wedding gift for Elena and her soon-to-be husband, Ethan Mercer. Now the papers were gone. In their place, a single hair stained with blood pressed between two blank sheets. I remembered Ethan's text from last night. He thanked me. He said, "No worries. Your daughter is lucky." Reading it again, I saw there was no mention of love, only careful words about the future, about opportunity, about a new start for both families. A man who loved my daughter wouldn't speak that way. A man who eyed our assets would. I folded that mocking note into my vest pocket. Fear shifted into something colder. A chill settled into my bones. I knew I had to keep quiet. If I reacted now, I'd lose whatever chance I had to find who was behind this. I told Elena I would take care of her. I told her the wedding would go on. She looked at me like a child who'd lost childhood in one night. I wanted to hold her. My hands were numb. At noon, while they prepared the bridal car, I walked out back to the garden. The wooden swing I built for Elena when she was 8 creaked in the wind, sounding like a long, tired sigh. I thought back to the day she brought Ethan home. Polite enough, gentle eyes. But something felt off. I've started companies. I've met people who smile while they stab. Still, I let my daughter's happiness drown out my instincts. I paid that price now. Around 2, my phone rang. It was Ethan. He sounded calm. He asked if Elena was okay, and if we should postpone the ceremony. I answered briefly, no. The wedding goes on. He hesitated, then gave a thin laugh. Good. Everything will go smoothly. You'll be proud. I hung up. My chest tightened. Smooth, the way he said it made my skin crawl. That night, I sat alone in my study and looked at my wife's photo on the wall. She used to tell me, "Ray, if our daughter is ever harmed, don't let kindness stop you from acting." I understood those words then more clearly than ever. My hand moved without me thinking. I opened a drawer and took out an old company phone, the one I used when I still ran the business. I turned on a recorder and set an app to monitor sound. I don't know what will happen at the wedding tomorrow. But I know one thing for sure: the person who did this to my daughter will show up, And when he does, I will be ready. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena's shaved head, and that note, those crooked words carved into my mind like a blade. I tried to stay calm, told myself if I let emotions take over, I'd lose. But the more I fought it, the deeper the pain went. What father could stand watching his daughter walk into marriage carrying that kind of shame? Morning light filtered through the Seattle windows, pale, cold, metallic. I made coffee but couldn't swallow a sip. Elena sat quietly at the table wearing a soft silver wig. She kept touching her teacup, as if afraid someone might see the raw skin beneath. Then she whispered, "Dad, I'm scared they'll notice." I rested my hand on her shoulder and said as steady as I could, "No one has the right to make you ashamed of what they did. Today, you hold your head high. I'll take care of the rest." She nodded faintly. Maybe she still believed I could fix anything like when she was little, but this time, I wasn't sure. Before we left, I went into my office to check the transfer documents, the ones that vanished yesterday. I wanted to be sure. If someone had stolen them, they'd planned it well. But when I opened the safe, it was still empty. Only this time, I found a faint inked fingerprint on the metal frame, a man's hand, and wedged between the panels a small titanium ring, the kind Ethan always wore. I clenched it in my fist. The pieces started falling into place. There was no doubt anymore the man who shaved my daughter's head was the man she was about to marry. By noon, the staff arrived to decorate the wedding hall. I went downstairs. Amid the noise, I heard Ethan's voice from the living room. I stopped behind the curtain. He was on the phone, speaking low but clear. "Don't worry, babe. Once the contract's done, we'll be free. The old man won't even see it coming." I froze. The old man. He meant me. And babe. I knew that voice. Chloe. My assistant for 10 years, someone I trusted like family. My late wife had adored her. Chloe brought me soup when my wife passed, told me she'd always think of me as a father. Now her voice slid into my ears like poison. I pulled out my phone and hit record. My hand trembled, but Ethan's next words cut through the fog. "By tonight, it's done. The Hale name will finally pay off." That wasn't just greed. That was a sentence. They weren't after a marriage. They were after everything. I didn't step in, didn't shout, didn't break anything. I just stood there, silent still, and burned every word into my memory. By late afternoon, rain started to fall, that heavy gray Seattle rain. I sat in my car outside the hotel. Through the window, I saw Elena upstairs trying on her wedding dress. She forced a smile for the makeup artist. Outside, Ethan leaned against a wall, texting, smirking every time his screen lit up. I knew what I had to do. Wait. No sudden moves. No warnings. If I showed my hand now, everything would collapse. That evening, I called an old friend, Aiden Brooks, a retired investigator. I told him straight, I need audio evidence. Someone's planning to take everything I own. I need it recorded legal and clean. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Ray, you once told me timing wins the fight. Now it's your turn to remember that." I hung up and checked the time. Only a few hours left before the ceremony at St. Helena's Church. I put on my suit, tightened my tie, and looked in the mirror, saw a father pretending to be calm, while a storm brewed beneath the surface. As I headed for the door, the landline rang. A woman's voice came through, calm, familiar. "Mr. Hale, don't go to the church. Something's going to happen today." I snapped back, "Who is this?" But the line went dead, just silence. A chill ran down my spine. That voice, I'd know it anywhere. Chloe. Why would she warn me? If she was part of it. I stood in the hallway listening to the rain on the roof. My head spun with questions. Maybe she was regretting it. Or maybe it was another trap. I looked up the stairs. Elena was walking down dressed in white, pale but calmer than she'd been that morning. She asked softly, "Dad, are you okay?" I smiled, hiding everything inside. "I'm fine, sweetheart. We just have to get through today." But deep down, I knew. This day wouldn't end like any other wedding day. The rain hadn't stopped when Elena and I arrived at St. Helena's Church. That damp, heavy air made everything feel slower. Even the sound of our shoes echoing against the stone floor seemed to hang in the air. I kept the calm face of a father walking his daughter down the aisle. But inside, every muscle in my body was wound tight as wire. Chloe's voice kept circling in my head. "Don't go to the church. Something's going to happen today." Elena walked beside me, her hand trembling slightly. The soft silver wig covered her wounded scalp, falling gently over her shoulders. Anyone seeing her for the first time would never guess the humiliation she'd endured just a day before. She smiled faintly at the relatives around us, fragile but still beautiful. I held her hand tighter, afraid that if I let go, everything would come apart. Inside, colored light from the stained glass spilled across the pews, red, blue, and green patches that flickered like a warning. The air smelled faintly of wax and lilies, peaceful on the surface. But underneath, something dark moved. I scanned the room. Ethan was talking with the priest, calm, confident, gentle-eyed. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed he was the perfect man. Elena looked at him with the last flicker of trust in her eyes. I looked and saw something else, a mask polished by years of deceit. Before the ceremony began, I excused myself to take a call. My heart needed a moment to settle. As I walked down the side hall, a low voice caught my ear coming from a small prep room used by the flower crew. I stopped. "Ethan, no, you don't come here now. Just wait till it's over. After that, we're clear." I froze, hiding behind the half-open door. His back was to me, voice lowered, steady. "Yes, she's already signed everything. Once the transfer goes through, I'll vanish for a while. Chloe, don't worry, I've got it under control." My blood went cold. Chloe. Again. But I hadn't signed anything. What papers were they talking about? I pulled out my phone and hit record. Every nerve in me screamed to burst in to grab him by the throat and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not now. If I lost control, Elena would pay the price. So I stood still, letting him walk past me, his face glowing with that same charming smile as if none of it had happened. When he left, I stepped to the desk. The phone screen was still lit. A new text message glowed on it. "Room 4B, key under the vase. End it before he notices." My hand went cold. That could only mean me. I hurried down the hall, forcing my breathing steady. Outside, the choir began to sing the signal that the ceremony was about to begin. I returned to my seat, eyes fixed on Ethan. He greeted guests, took Elena's hand, smiled so sweetly. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Then I noticed her Chloe, standing at the back of the church wearing a simple black dress, hair tied back, glasses hiding half her face. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just stared at her phone. For a brief moment she looked up, our eyes met. Less than a second. But I saw it clearly. That wasn't the look of a victor. It was fear, regret. The ceremony went on as planned. The priest spoke his blessings. The choir filled the hall. Guests whispered, cameras clicked. But all I could hear was my heartbeat. Elena stood before the altar, voice trembling but steady. "I promise to stand by you through every storm." My eyes burned. Ethan answered firmly, "And I promise to protect you always." Those vows hit me like knives. I watched him kiss her hand and felt something inside me twist. I glanced toward the back pew. Chloe was gone. Only her phone remained on the seat screen, glowing with an unsent message, "He knows." I bowed my head, pretending to pray, but one question kept circling in my mind. Was she warning me? Or warning him? When the final bells rang and guests rose in applause, everyone thought it was a perfect wedding. But I knew the play wasn't over. Inside my vest pocket, my phone kept recording, capturing every sweet lie, every poisoned promise. I looked at Elena, her tired smile, then at the man she now called husband. And what I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was the stillness before the storm. I didn't know who would strike first, Chloe, Ethan, or me, But I knew one thing for sure tonight at the wedding reception: someone was going to lose everything. And when I raised my glass to toast the happy couple, no one would know that in my pocket. The proof of their betrayal was ready to explode. The church bells still echoed in my mind as our car rolled toward the Emerald Tower Hotel, the site of the celebration. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with gray clouds thick as smoke. Beside me, Elena sat quietly staring out the window. Her fingers were laced together, her face pale and tired, shadowed by fear. I looked at my daughter, and something inside me ached. The vows had been spoken, but I knew they were hollow words. In my suit pocket, the phone still held every recording, every breath, every lie that came from Ethan's mouth, like a knife waiting for the right moment to strike. When we arrived, the hall was warm and golden. Laughter, champagne glasses, clinking the scent of white orchids in the air. Everyone believed this was the happiest day of the Hale family. But to me, it was a stage perfectly set for judgment. I spotted Ethan in the crowd laughing among his friends, glass in hand, the picture of a man who thought he'd won. Every now and then, he glanced my way, part cautious, part smug. I met his eyes with a faint smile, the kind only old men give when they know more than they let on. Elena was surrounded by her friends posing for photos, forcing smiles. I sat alone at the front table, waiting for my moment. About 40 minutes later, the host called my name, asked me to say a few words, as the father of the bride. I rose, slowly straightened my vest, took a deep breath. The spotlight hit. The room fell quiet. "Thank you," I began, steady and slow. "Thank you all for being here today, to witness the most important day of my daughter's life. For a father, nothing means more than seeing his child step into a new beginning." Applause, laughter, a few soft awes from the tables behind me. I smiled, lifted my glass. "I've prepared a wedding gift," I continued. "A gift I've spent over 40 years building the legacy of our family. A transfer contract, worth $17 million. Gasps rippled through the room. Whistles, murmurs. Ethan stood smiling wide, pretending to be humble. I set my glass down, my voice calm. "But before I sign anything, I'd like you all to hear something first." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker I'd set up earlier. A soft beep. Then Ethan's voice filled the hall. "Don't worry, babe. Once the contract's done, we'll be free. The old man won't even see it coming." Silence. Pure, heavy silence. Ethan's face went pale. His eyes darted around the room. "No. That's not..." I pressed play again. "By tonight, it's done. The Hale name will finally pay off." The words hit like a hammer. Guests began whispering, a few raised their phones, recording. Ethan stepped forward, forcing a shaky smile. "Mr. Hale, you're misunderstanding. I looked straight at him. You called me old man a few hours ago, and now you call me dad. I'm afraid it's a little late for that." I tapped the screen again. "This," I said, "is a text I found on the phone of my former assistant, Ms. Chloe Daniels, room 4B key under the vase. End it before he notices." A few gasps. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I went on, my voice colder now. For anyone still thinking this might be a misunderstanding, 4B is the maintenance room where the security system was shut off this morning. Ethan froze. Sweat ran down his neck. And Elena, my poor Elena, stood motionless. She looked at him, then at me. Her lips trembled. "Dad, is this true?" I nodded. Her glass slipped from her hand. It shattered, the sound sharp and final. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the note, the one that read, "Now you finally look like who you really are. You recognize this Ethan, who put this on my daughter's pillow this morning." He stumbled back, mouth open, but before he could speak, a woman's voice rang out from the doorway. I did. Everyone turned. Chloe stood there, pale, shaking eyes hollow. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said through tears. "He forced me. I was scared." Ethan shouted, "Shut up." I didn't move. I just watched. Because in that moment I knew the game was over. I lifted the microphone one last time, my voice low. There's no gift for betrayal. The only gift tonight is the truth. I set the note on the table and turned away. Behind me, chaos broke loose, chairs scraping, guests gasping, Elena crying. I walked straight out into the hall where the night wind rushed in cold and wet with the smell of old rain. What I felt wasn't victory, it was emptiness. But somewhere beneath it all was a quiet kind of peace. The next morning the house was silent again, as if the wedding had never happened. Morning light slipped through the curtains, falling across a table cluttered with wine glasses and scattered wedding photos. I sat there still in a wrinkled shirt, my head heavy from a sleepless night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena's face, stunned, broken, when those recordings played before hundreds of people. I thought that once I exposed everything, I'd finally feel relieved. But no. The truth doesn't free you. It strips you bare. All my life I'd fought to protect my daughter, but it turned out that my final act of protection cut her the deepest. I got up and walked to the safe, an old habit. I wanted to clear out the documents and everything that had to do with Ethan. When I opened it, the light off the steel caught my eye, and I froze. On top of the files was a new envelope in handwriting that wasn't mine. Black ink, a little shaky but familiar. To Dad, from someone who finally understands. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a note and a small USB drive. The note, hastily written probably last night, said, "Dad, I know you only wanted to protect me, but the truth is bigger than what you saw. Please listen to this before you hate me." I plugged in the USB. Chloe's voice came through, raspy, trembling. "Raymond, I know you'll hear this. I wasn't working for Ethan, I was working for someone else. You have no idea who paid to make all this happen." Her voice broke, followed by a knock on the door and her quick, panicked breathing. "If I disappear, check Ethan's bank account. The money didn't come from him. You'll know the name." My heart started pounding. Someone else who would have a reason to do this. I opened my company's financial records, scrolling through the transactions, and then the name appeared. Daniel Cross. Daniel, my former vice president. I'd fired him 3 years ago for embezzlement. He'd sworn that one day he'd make me lose everything. I exhaled slowly. So that was it. Ethan was just a pawn. Chloe another victim. And the man pulling the strings had been Daniel all along. I called Aiden, my old friend and former detective. After hearing the whole story, he said, "If you're right, Daniel used Ethan and Chloe to destroy you to get revenge and take back control of the company. I'll open an investigation." I said quietly, "I don't want revenge, Aiden. I just want it to end." That afternoon I went to the hospital where Elena was being treated for the burns on her scalp. She turned away when I entered, but didn't speak. I sat beside her in silence for a long time, then said softly, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to see it all that way." She let out a faint sob, then whispered, "If you hadn't done it, would you have forgiven him?" I looked at her, my voice low, steady. "No, but I wanted you to see the truth yourself, not as a victim." She gave me a weak smile, but it was real. "I get it now, Dad. Maybe pain is what we need to finally grow up." It was the first time in years I saw something new in her eyes. Not dependence, but strength. We sat in silence watching the rain outside the window. This time the rain didn't feel cold. 3 months later, Daniel's scheme was exposed. Ethan was arrested for conspiracy, and Chloe turned herself in, confessing everything. Elena recovered slowly, but she changed. She left the city, starting work with an organization that helps women who've survived abuse, something she said she wanted to do for herself. As for me, I sold my shares in the company and moved to a quiet cabin by a lake in Oregon, the one my late wife and I had always dreamed of buying. Every morning I make coffee and write letters to Elena about the birds, the calm water, and the sunrises without fog. One day, she wrote back, "I've forgiven Dad, not them myself." I folded the letter and smiled. After all these years of living by reason, I finally understood the truth isn't always meant to expose. Sometimes it's meant to set us free. I stepped out onto the porch, the lake glowing orange with the sunset. My life, though marked by loss, still had one thing left untouched: a father's love for his daughter. And maybe that's the one thing that can never be betrayed, because some battles aren't meant to be won, only to be survived with your heart still capable of love. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. Maybe all of us at some point have trusted the wrong person, have given our love to someone who didn't deserve it. But what truly matters is finding the courage to stand up again and live honestly with ourselves. If this story touched something in your heart, hit like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next emotional journey, where every story reminds us that sometimes losing isn't the end, it's the beginning, the right way. See you in the next video. Next.